had been dating my girlfriend, Sarah, for almost 3 years when she told me about someone from her past. His name was Kyle, a guy she had briefly been friends with in college. She said he had always been a little too intense, showing up unannounced at her favorite spots and messaging her constantly, even after she started ignoring him. At first, I thought it was just a weird, one-sided infatuation, something that would fade with time. But as Valentine's Day approached, Kyle's behavior took a turn for the worse. Sarah started receiving messages from an unknown number. The messages weren't threatening at first, but they were obsessive. He told her he missed her, that he thought about her constantly, and that they were meant to be together. Sarah blocked the number, but then the gifts started showing up. A bouquet of roses on her doorstep, a handwritten letter in her mailbox, describing how they were destined for each other. What unsettled her the most was that she hadn't shared her new address publicly. The realization that Kyle must have found it through some other means left her shaken. On Valentine's Day, I took Sarah to a nice restaurant to help distract her from the unsettling events of the past few weeks. We sat outside, enjoying the view of the city, when Sarah's face suddenly paled. "Don't look now," she whispered, "but I think Kyle is here." I casually glanced around, and sure enough, there was a man sitting a few tables away, his hat pulled low over his face. Every few moments, his eyes flickered in our direction. My stomach tightened. I asked Sarah if she wanted to leave, but she shook her head, not wanting to let him ruin our night. Eventually, Kyle stood up and walked away. We tried to move past it, hoping the ordeal was over. After dinner, we returned to my house, trying to shake off the tension from earlier. We settled onto the couch, talking, laughing, and letting our guard down. But just as things started to feel normal again, Sarah suddenly froze. "Did you hear that?" I listened carefully. At first, nothing. Then, a faint rustling outside the back door. My pulse quickened. I stood up and walked to the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. The yard was empty at first glance, but as I stepped onto the patio, I noticed something. The stack of firewood leaning against the house had been knocked over. A cold unease settled over me. There was no wind, no reason for them to fall. I looked around, my eyes scanning the bushes lining the yard. And then I saw it. A figure crouched behind the fence, barely visible in the dim light. My breath caught. Before I could say anything, the figure moved, stepping into the open. It was Kyle. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded. Kyle didn't answer. He took a step forward, and something in his posture told me he was about to rush me. Without thinking, I braced myself. As soon as he lunged, I tackled him to the ground. Sarah came running outside as I pinned him down. "Is it him?" she asked, her voice shaking. It was. Kyle struggled beneath me, muttering something I couldn't understand. I kept him pinned, telling Sarah to call the cops. Within minutes, the flashing lights of a police car filled the driveway. Officers pulled Kyle up, cuffing him as he ranted about how Sarah was supposed to be his. Sarah showed the officers the messages and the gifts he had left her. With that, Kyle was charged with stalking and trespassing. She was granted a restraining order, ensuring he wouldn't be able to come near her again. It's been 4 years since that night. Sarah and I are still together, living in a new place far from where it all happened. But even now, every so often, she still glances over her shoulder, just to make sure he's not watching. My boyfriend and I had been together for a few years, and for Valentine's Day, we planned a cute dinner at a popular restaurant. It was supposed to be a simple, romantic evening, but things quickly took a strange turn. As we walked toward the restaurant, we noticed a couple standing outside. They weren't talking, just staring at us. It was an uncomfortable kind of stare, intense and unblinking. I nudged my boyfriend, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, and we stepped inside. The hostess told us there would be a 45-minute wait and that she would text us when our table was ready. Since there was a small mini-golf course across the street, my boyfriend suggested we go there to kill some time. As we turned to leave, the woman from the strange couple suddenly stood up, extending her hand. "Hi, I'm Mrs. Hartley," she said with a too-wide smile. I hesitated before shaking her hand, and she quickly introduced her silent husband. Then she launched into a spiel about how they were photographers and thought we were a beautiful couple. She invited us to their studio, offering a free photo session while we waited for our dinner reservation. Something felt wrong. She didn't have a business card, no social media links, just a vague promise that their studio was a 5-minute drive away. Red flags went up immediately. My boyfriend politely declined, saying we had plans. Her smile never wavered, but there was something hollow behind it. The husband never spoke, just watched us. We left quickly. As we played mini golf, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling. It was unusually empty that night, which made it even stranger. Then, about 20 minutes later, the entrance bell rang. I turned and my heart sank. It was them. The couple walked inside, scanning the place. When they spotted us, Mrs. Hartley's face lit up with that same unsettling grin. She and her husband made a beeline for the check-in counter, whispering something to the attendant. My boyfriend and I exchanged a nervous glance. "They're probably just playing mini golf too," he said, trying to reassure me. But when they came to our hole, Mrs. Hartley let out a small laugh. "Crazy how we both ended up here, right?" she said. I felt sick. There was no way this was a coincidence. Then, for the first time, her husband spoke. "We should do a face-off," he said. "Hartley versus you two." That's when my boyfriend's expression shifted. His last name wasn't something he had shared. Yet this man knew it. Without hesitation, we politely declined and left. We agreed to go back to his place after dinner, but the encounter still weighed on me. We returned to the restaurant, had our meal, and tried to move past it. As we finished eating, my boyfriend went to the restroom. As I waited, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned, and I swear, I saw Mrs. Hartley peeking from around the corner. The second I looked directly at her, she was gone. I convinced myself it was just paranoia. The drive back to his place took us down a long, tree-lined road. As we drove, my boyfriend noticed a car following us. At first, it seemed normal, but when he made an unnecessary turn to test them, they turned too. "That's them," he muttered, gripping the wheel. Panic set in. We pulled into a CVS parking lot, hoping they would keep driving. They didn't. We got out, pretending to be casual, and went inside. We waited, peeking out the window. After a few minutes, their car was gone. Relieved, we got back in the car and continued to his house. Then, just a few minutes into the tree-lined road, we heard it. A loud pop. The car lurched. My boyfriend slammed on the brakes. Both of our front tires had blown. That's when my boyfriend's face went pale. "Get out," he said urgently. "Now." We ran into the woods, hiding behind trees. My boyfriend quickly called the police, whispering our location. The operator told us to stay on the line, but he refused, hanging up. A few minutes passed in tense silence. Then we heard an engine approaching. A car slowed to a stop near our abandoned vehicle. Then a woman's voice rang out. "Damn it, we took too long." My stomach dropped. We heard a car door slam, and then the sound of tires peeling out as they sped away. We stayed hidden until the police arrived minutes later. The officers took our statements and searched the area, but the couple was long gone. They promised to investigate, but no leads ever came up. We never found out who they really were or what they wanted. That was 4 years ago. My boyfriend and I are now married, and while we've moved to a different city, we always double-check our surroundings. And we never ever follow strangers anywhere, no matter how friendly they seem. During the fall semester of my sophomore year, I was taking online classes through a well-known university while preparing to transfer to a different school for the winter. Since I knew I'd be moving soon, I didn't want to get too attached to anyone, but I still wanted to meet new people and make friends, maybe even find someone to date casually. That's how I met Rachel. Rachel and I matched on a dating app and hit it off almost instantly. We had a lot in common, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. She was a little quirky, but in an endearing way. After chatting for a week, we decided to meet in person. Our first date was simple, grabbing food and walking around downtown. Things progressed quickly from there, and by the time winter break came around, we were seeing each other regularly. But when she returned from her holiday trip home, something about her seemed off. The fun, teasing attitude she once had was now laced with something sharper. Her jokes felt more like jabs. Her sarcasm carried a hint of aggression. I brushed it off, assuming she was just stressed about the new semester. One night, as Valentine's Day approached, we decided to spend the evening together at my apartment. I didn't have Friday classes, and Rachel mentioned she'd skip hers, so we wouldn't feel rushed. We had a laid-back night, picked up fast food, watched a movie, and just hung out. Eventually, things got more intimate, and she asked if she could stay over since it was snowing and her place was a short but cold walk away. Of course, I said yes. At some point in the night, I woke up slightly to the sound of her getting out of bed. I didn't say anything, assuming she was going to the bathroom. I heard the door shut and the light flick on, and then I drifted back to sleep. A couple of hours later, I stirred again. Something felt off. I turned to check on Rachel, but she wasn't in bed. My first thought was that she might still be in the bathroom, but when I looked, the light was off. My grogginess turned to unease as I sat up and reached for my phone. No texts, no missed calls. And then I heard a creak from across the room. Rachel was standing in the far corner of my bedroom, facing the wall. I felt a chill run through me. "Rachel?" I called out softly. No response. I turned on the small lamp beside my bed. The dim glow barely illuminated the room, but it was enough for me to see her standing completely still, her posture unnaturally stiff. I slowly got out of bed and approached her, carefully placing my hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked again. 10 seconds of silence passed, and then in an instant, she spun around faster than I thought possible. Her eyes were wide, completely devoid of emotion, and before I could react, she started screaming and hitting me. It wasn't hard, but it was frantic wild, like an outburst of pure chaos. I stumbled back, falling onto the bed as she continued her frantic assault. Then, as suddenly as it started, she stopped. She grabbed her clothes off the floor, ran out of my apartment, and slammed the door behind her. I was too stunned to move. When I finally gathered myself, I locked the door and sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That's when I noticed the smell. A foul, acrid stench was coming from the bathroom. I hesitated before walking over and turning on the light. The scene inside sent a wave of nausea through me. The shower curtain was torn down, my toiletries were scattered across the floor, and the worst part? She had smeared something vile across the mirror. I called the police immediately. When an officer arrived, I explained everything that had happened. I showed them her dating app profile, but when they tried to look it up, it had already been deleted. Her Snapchat was gone too. The only proof I had of her was a single picture I had saved, but even that had a filter on it, obscuring her real features. The police took a report but said there wasn't much they could do. They advised me to have someone stay over that night in case she tried to return. I took their advice and called my best friend Ethan, who was also majoring in the same field she had claimed to be in. When he arrived, I told him everything. Then I showed him the picture I had saved. His response made my blood run cold. "I've never seen this girl before," he said, "and my class is small. I definitely remember her." We stayed up late watching movies, trying to shake the unease, until we both eventually fell asleep. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my doorknob rattling. For a full minute, I sat there, barely breathing, listening as someone attempted to open my front door from the outside. The rattling stopped abruptly. I crept to the peephole and peered out. Nothing. The hallway was empty. No one ever came back. But the whole thing still haunts me to this day. Who was she really? And what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night?